Hello, and welcome to So You Think You Can Rule Persia, the podcast where we rate and review all the rulers of Persia from Diocles to Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. I am Sariel, and my pronouns are they, them.
And I'm Umberto, my pronouns are he, him. Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 102, Yazid II, where we get to find out who gets to succeed Umar II, the only good Umayyad, evidently one of the not good Umayyads, based on general opinion, so we'll see if Yazid is any good at all, or if he's just been wrongly maligned by later historians who just simply don't like him because of his family. So, who knows? We'll find out. Do you broadly remember, Sariel, what happened last episode? Do you have any highlights in mind?
I think it was quite an interesting episode, but also we decided that the ruler himself unfortunately fell just short of getting a Shahanshah, if I remember correctly. It was right. Not as impressive. There was a lot of... I mean, he did a good job, but it was a lot of, damage control, trying to not keep expanding that much, cutting short a couple of projects so that we could, consolidate before we kept moving forward. There were some issues with the succession that needed to be solved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Umar, right?
Yeah, Umar.
Was someone that had been, in a way, brought to the future through propaganda and through, legend.
Mm-hmm.
Because future sources really like him. But that had also worked a little bit against him because it was hard to get a good idea of who actually the person was and then who the myth was.
Yeah, that's fair. He was
had
this entire ultra-pious man who was just...
there's this image of him being extremely, extremely perfect in a way that makes you think, well, but how much of this is just a story that people want to tell and how much of this is, who he was? And also, he has this whole prophecy behind him of being someone with a very prominent scar on his face from a horse's hoof.
Yes.
And it had been said that someone with a scar on his face would... What was the prophecy? Bring together...
Bring justice to the world, yes. And so, well, he tried, but the main problem with Umar was that he simply didn't live long enough to see if his policies actually work or not. So he died after 3 or 4 years of reign, and then eventually left the throne to Yazid II, who we'll remember last time when Umar was asked about the succession, he said, yeah, I know Yazid isn't very good, but that's the decision that was made before me, so I don't really have much of a choice. So that's who we're presented with today. We can have a look at what is Yazid like, what is his life. Well, Yazid II was born in Damascus in 690 and was the grandson of Yazid I on his mother's side, while being the son of Abd al-Malik on his father's side, clearly. In this way, he joined the Marwanid and Sufyanid sides of the Umayyad family. So the Marwanid side being the one that's been ruling for the past 4 or 5 rulers, and the Sufyanid side was the one of Muawiyah and Yazid. So the original Umayyad clan that took control as soon as the Rashidun fell off. And, well, Yazid spent a rather pampered life growing up, because it doesn't look like he was appointed as governor or general anywhere, but he just had a fairly relaxed life in the capital and only really left it for the purposes of pilgrimage. So he's not really making a name for himself or working much. He is saying, well, I'm a rich and powerful prince. All I have to do is stay in the capital and watch people peel grapes for me, and that'll be fine. So that's his life so far as a young man. Although it looks like in the theme of court politics, he was part of the Qaisi faction of the Umayyad family. So if you remember, the Qaisis are one of these 2 tribal groups opposed to the Yemenis, And the Qaisis are opposite to Umar's previous ideas. So they're saying, we should just keep expanding forever. That's the best way to make money and make us continue prospering. So we should just keep going, and actually we shouldn't reform things because things are good as they are right now. So it's the little c conservative group where they want things to stay as they've always been so far. And well, all this chill life changed when Yazid's brother Suleiman proclaimed on his deathbed that Yazid should succeed Umar II, which means that Yazid was heir for all of Umar's reign. So he finally was thrust into a position of authority, despite, well, we don't know if he didn't want it, but he certainly wasn't striving for it. So if he wanted it, he didn't really make much of an effort to get it. But as I just mentioned before, Yazid was such a useless party boy that Umar was said to have been considering to change the line of succession to just make someone else the heir, someone more capable. But ultimately, he either died of disease or was poisoned before he could make his decision. So, regardless of Umar's thoughts, Yazid is now caliph at last in the year 720. So, he is at the age of 30 and he's become caliph. So, hopefully, we can expect a good 40 to 50 years of reign from him and make sure that the caliphate will prosper forever and expand to the ends of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So, the problem is that his reign started with some conflict internally, because there was a rebellion in Iraq against the Qaisi faction's government of the region, saying that the policy of Hajjaj must not be reimposed on us. So they don't want to go back to this old Qaisi system that was there during Abd al-Malik. They want to keep essentially Umar's reforms. But to sort of suppress this revolt, Yazid went back on Umar's plan and decided to use Syrian soldiers under Maslama, his half-brother who had besieged Constantinople, and he tried to use them to break down the rebellion and leaned on Qaisi tribes to keep the Yamani elements in check. The Syrian army then marched into Iraq and then crushed the rebels, after which Maslama was appointed as governor of Iraq and the East, where he stamped down on any lingering embers of rebellion. However, we should also keep in mind that despite supporting the Qaisis, Yazid wasn't radically on their side, but he tried mainly to reduce Yamani influence, which had grown under the two more recent caliphs. In particular, he had support of the Syrian Yamanis and chose governors from among them. So, yes, it's a tribal conflict, but as we've seen, the main issue is, do we expand and maintain things as they are, or do we reform the empire and put the brakes on everything?
A question. Do I remember correctly
Yes.
that Umar was poisoned?
Yes, that's right. Umar was poisoned before he could change the succession of
Yes.
Yazid. So part of the story that we have is that Umar was discussing with some Kharijites, we respect you, but why is Yazid your heir? And Umar said, well, it was decided for me by my predecessor, I can't really change it. And they said, well, you're the caliph, sure you can.
Surely you can, yeah.
Yeah, and so he said, I'll be back in 3 days after I think about it, and then he was poisoned, so...
I see.
That was
and
the
also,
vibe.
it was kind of noble of him to be like, well, this was set up before my time, and I agreed that I would keep it, so I will keep it. Instead of what every caliph had done, and every ruler has done before then, which is like, yeah, this was set up before I came to power, but now it's my decision.
Yeah, exactly. So, we have this precedent, which has given legitimacy to the last 4 caliphs. So,
yeah,
if you break that precedent, then it's going to be more difficult for the succession. And remember how massive a mess it was with the civil wars at the start of the caliphate. So, we should just be cool and maintain the status quo. But, well, Yazid really disagreed with Umar's policies, because one of the things he differed in was the system of taxation. Because he tried to reverse Umar's tax reforms by imposing the jizya, this poll tax for non-believers, back on the non-Arabs who had converted to Islam that had been exempted for it. So you remember there was this massive social issue about the relationship between Muslim Arabs and Muslim non-Arabs because they're being treated differently.
Yes.
Umar tried to make sure everybody was treated equally, but now people are unhappy with that, and Yazid is going back on these reforms. This as you can imagine, caused plenty of resentment. In particular, in Khorasan, there were several revolts that would flare up and down for the next 20 years. While in North Africa, Yazid's governor was murdered almost immediately and caused serious instability in the region. So things are becoming dangerous at the edges of the caliphate because they do sorely need reform, but the Qaisi establishment in Damascus is trying very much to reduce this and make sure that the caliphate will continue as it has. But yeah, in foreign policy, he also went back against Umar's reforms and restarted military expansion with campaigns into Gaul and Sardinia, against the Romans in Sicily and Anatolia, against the Khazars in the Caucasus, and against the Turks in Transoxiana. And these didn't really always go well. So on the Turkic front, things were problematic because commands was in the hand of a man who didn't really have the skills for it. And there's even a poem directed at him that goes like this. You advanced on the enemy at night as if you were playing with your girlfriend. Your was drawn and your sword sheathed. For your enemies, you are like an affectionate bride. Against us, you are like a sharpened sword. So, yeah.
Excuse me?
Yes, this will probably be bleeped out, but yes.
That is so very funny that they still made it into a poem instead of being like just straight up insulting him, but that's so funny.
It is very good. You know, this is going to be a theme.
You're out here with your sword by your side and you're out in hand, sword
yes, exactly.
on the floor. This is so funny.
Yeah. What do you expect to do with that sort of sword?
I hate that. That's just, I mean, I love it, but I hate it.
Yeah, it's bad times. So they don't respect this man.
Yeah, clearly.
Incidentally, this is the man that tried to re-implement the jizya in Khorasan, messing things up for everyone.
Every time you say Khorasan, I have to think of Coruscant of Star Wars.
Yes, Khorasan is going to be more important as the time goes on, Sarah.
I feel like maybe that was the inspiration.
Imagining it. Who knows? It could be.
You know.
Might be fun. But yeah, at the same time, this is when a grand Turkic invasion started across the border, which greatly devastated the area and saw many Muslim fortresses surrendering to the invaders. Eventually, this governor was replaced by another the next year, and this one tried to invade Sogdia, which is a region around north of Afghanistan. But there was not really much progress there, and the lands beyond the Oxus remained quite unstable. But okay, what is he innovating? Sure, there's a lot of going back to old things, but why? You know, is he trying anything new? Is there something interesting that this man is doing or no? Well, an aspect that is quite famous of Yazid's policy is issuing a grand edict of iconoclasm, which commanded the destruction of all images of humans and animals across the caliphate, which included all the Christian churches of the empire and even private houses. This is quite interesting because at around this time, shortly afterwards, Leo III, the Roman emperor, would begin the policy of iconoclasm. And so it's possible that Yazid's edict also inspired this. So generally, Abrahamic faiths have the idea of you will not make idols. That's one of the 10 commandments.
Yeah.
You only worship God, not images.
Yes.
And so the Christians, with all their images, were saying, well, if the Muslims are doing it and they're doing quite well, then maybe we should look into this no images thing. And so began about 100 years of religious schism because, well, everybody's going to be unhappy with it, aren't they? And in general, this is worth noting because the Quran itself doesn't have any direct prohibition of images, but just in places of worship, with other prohibitions being later developments. So you remember that we did have a direct portrait of Abd al-Malik on official coinage, so it wasn't something that's just not to be done. It's just for places of worship specifically. And even then, even when these prohibitions were introduced, this was strongly dependent on region and traditions, so different branches of Islam are more or less lenient towards the making of images, just as they are towards music and other such things. This also may have been an issue in antagonism with Christianity, since we saw that Abd al-Malik's change in coinage had angered the Romans enough to go to war. And a last interesting possibility is that Muslims may have used churches for their prayers, and that having Christian images in them went against the prohibition of the Prophet, so they had to get rid of them everywhere. So maybe they prayed together in churches because, well, it's a place of worship, and as we've been saying before, Islam is basically seeing itself as, we're kind of like Christians, but we also have an extra cool prophet to add on to the end there. So, well, why shouldn't we worship the same God in the same place? It would make sense. Why not? And well, Serial, we get some slander for Yazid about this, because according to some very hostile Greek sources, Yazid did this because a Jewish magician told him that he would rule 30 years if he did this. Although, the real prophecy was apparently that he would rule only 30 months if he did this, as opposed to 30 years. And thus, the man was tricked into committing sacrilege. But yeah, although with this general edict, it's strange that it wasn't really mentioned in our usual sources, such as Al-Tabari or Al-Masudi, but only through minor local sources, so in Egypt, Syria, Palestine, northern Iraq, or foreign sources, which is a bit weird, because surely if it was that important, somebody would have told us about it, our main historians we've been following all along. So it's been suggested that this was mainly directed at Christians, who were the most prominent in their religious imagery of living beings. So maybe it was just saying, no, don't destroy all images, just destroy the Christian ones, because we use those temples as well. Although there is an anecdote from Egypt about a statue in the baths that was destroyed after this edict. So maybe it was just like a general experience. Who knows? However, despite this pious streak, Yazid was known to have been a frivolous man, enthralled to his female slaves. Although this probably was exaggerated by his enemies in the future. And we're told that when his favorite died, he refused to have her buried for several days, and when at last he relented, he spoke this poem. If my soul ever consoles itself for your loss, if it ever renounces its love, it will owe it to despair, never to acceptance. And then he is said to have died only a few days after this poem.
How dramatic.
But yeah, Al-Masudi tells us that his half-brother Maslama, who is now Viceroy of the East, reproached Yazid and encouraged him to be more like his cousin Umar and not dedicate himself to pleasures. According to the story, Yazid immediately said, no, you know what, that's fair. I need to change my ways. I'm the caliph. I need to be more righteous than all this. This isn't how things should be. And so he started to be more pious and more orderly. But the problem is that his favorite slave then sent a poem to him to sing a song that went, what is even the point of living if you can't enjoy the pleasures of life? And Yazid decided, fair enough, I'll go back to doing that. That sounds like a nice time. There's also a story where Yazid particularly appreciated a certain song, and when asking who had composed it, he found it was from an Arab pagan who was an enemy of the Prophet. But Yazid said that it didn't matter because he had been a good musician and Yazid appreciated the craft. So separate the art from the artist, says Yazid II.
I see.
Overall, he seems to just be very enthralled of these two female slaves of his, two concubines, and he just doesn't really care much for the caliphate. It looks like he's saying, yeah, basically just reverse things to what they used to be, and we'll see how it goes. But then we get, of course, to the classical problem, because Yazid started to get sick in January of 724. And he wanted his own son, Al-Walid, to succeed him. But, according to the typical tradition, the idea was that, well, you make your brother succeed, not your son. So that's slightly messy. So what he tried to do was, he talked to his brother Hisham, who was nominally his heir. He's the next oldest Umayyad. And so he tried to get him to just give up his inheritance, give up his position as heir to the throne, and make sure that he would have a pension and just go off, live his happy life, no need to rule, this is fine. But as we'll see next time, Hisham was an ambitious man. And so, with Yazid getting sicker and sicker, he managed to only obtain that his son al-Walid would succeed Hisham. So, finally, on the 26th of January 724, Yazid himself died at the young age of 34, being succeeded by his brother Hisham, though with the promise that eventually his son Al-Walid would succeed and take the throne. So there we go, Serial. That was the short and sweet story of Yazid II.
Yeah, so we keep doing the same thing of like, okay, we shift horizontally the succession. We promise to then continue vertically. We trust that it'll happen.
Because the thing is that right now we're kind of running out of sons of Abd al-Malik because, well, they're all dying off. All of them quite young. I mean, they're all dying in the 30s and 40s, but it's just happening.
Yeah.
And, well, now Yazid was lucky enough that he was in the position where his son could later succeed. So we'll see what Al-Walid II does in 2 episodes. But for now, next time we'll see what Hisham does, the last of the sons of Abd al-Malik to rule. And, well, we'll see if he's worthy of the position. Because, as we've seen with Yazid, the problem is that a lot of the tensions in the caliphate are coming to the fore, and nobody seems to have a proper plan on how to fix them. And we're starting to get revolts in the provinces. So we'll have to see how that plays out. So yeah, Serial, are you ready to rate Yazid II?
Yeah. I feel like we barely started talking. We're already at the end. Damn.
Yes, it's a very short time for Yazid.
Hmm.
Our first category is final moments. How interesting was his death? He just died of unmentioned things.
Probably an illness or something, or an accident, or
it might have been the alcohol. Who knows?
Yeah,
there's a lot of things it could be. Simply not having a very good time. We don't really know much. I don't know if it's worth a 1 at all in general, or if it's
we
just
don't know.
meh.
That's the thing. I mean, he dies very young, which
yeah. Do you reckon that's worth a point, or do you think
maybe a 1?
Nothing. Who knows?
I feel like something more boring would be like, and he faded into the ether.
Yeah, fair. I agree. I think a
but
1's
a 1
there.
for, I guess.
Fair. Okay. So with a 1 and a 1, he gets a 1 out of 10 for final moments. Our next category is battle hardness. How good was he at war and fighting? Not very. He is.
Did he do much of this?
So he personally never fought at all. His main thing is that he authorized more expansions into Gaul and into Khorasan and against the Khazars and against the Romans. It's all a bunch of like smaller expeditions. It's no big, massive siege of Constantinople, but sending things around. But also, it's not going very well, as we heard from the poem of the man having his drawn.
His rooster, his chickens.
Yes, correct. So, what do you reckon that is? I think maybe a 1 for.
I guess he didn't do
it all.
If he wasn't,
Yeah, I feel like he's personally not doing much.
He wasn't a military
Yes, he's restarting
man.
the conflict, but the empire isn't expanding massively. It might be taking a few border settlements, and that's as far as we're doing. So, I think a 1, and I'm being generous. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So, with a 1 and a 1, he gets a 2 out of 20 for battle hardness. Our next category is scheminess. How good was he at plots and manipulations? Well, the one possible thing that you could add here is that his predecessor, Umar, died of poison shortly before changing his mind about Yazid's succession. Do we want to say that Yazid was in on it? Does this strike you as a man who would poison somebody for the throne? Or does he strike you as, honestly, he didn't really care? It might have been someone else. Maybe Hisham, who knows?
I don't think anything relevant happened.
I mean, nobody even nobody suggests that he personally poisoned Umar.
No.
But the idea is that the generic brothers of Suleiman were the ones who
I guess
made this poisoning.
I guess we could give him like a point for the
for the
circumstances.
Possibility, sure. Yeah, besides that, the rest of his reign is pretty basic. Nothing too exciting. So, yeah. Sticking with a 1?
Yeah. Okay.
So, with a 1 and a 1, he gets a 2 out of 20 for scheminess. Our next category is shock factor. How shocking was this man? We have a few things here. He is just a party boy, just living in luxury, not really doing much. He seems to be in the thrall of his concubines, which is quite particular. He does this whole iconoclastic edict. So he decides we should destroy all images, carry on. How widely spread it was, we don't really know, but it was there. Then we have that he tried to get better, but then he heard a poem about you should enjoy life and was like, hell yeah, I should. That's good for him. And then there's the general. He basically immediately went back on Umar's reforms and said, no, this is not how things have been. We need to go back to them. And then finally, he's just returning to the old ways. So I'd say that's a little bit shocking. He's not terrible. He's fine, I think he's about, I'm wondering around a 3, maybe a 2. What are your thoughts?
That's the issue. I don't have that many thoughts about him.
That's fair.
Like,
Yeah, not many people do.
Like, sadly, I'm like, I guess it was okay. I don't...
He was there being a guy, a dude.
I think I agree with you. I really don't see anything I should argue with you about. I'm like, yeah, I guess,
Yeah, he's a bit shocking. He's fine. I'd say, let me think. 1 for going back on Umar's stuff, and just a 1 for the general debauchery. And you know what? No, I'll add 1 more for the iconoclasm. That's worth something. So 3 for me.
Right. Okay, I'll match you.
Okay. So with a 3 and a 3, he gets a 6 out of 20 for shock factor. Our next category is Aaron Shine. How good was he for the Empire in general and Iran in particular? Not great. He's not doing great, because mostly he's just reimposing taxes on newly converted Muslims after they had been removed, and so that's causing revolts in North Africa and Khorasan. That's a mess. He's also using Syrian troops to suppress a revolt in Iraq, which was part of the whole problem. And he's sort of going back on a lot of what Umar did. So this is one of the problems with Umar, because he does a lot of things that are promising and smart, but they're immediately reversed. So that's unfortunate. So in general, for Iran, it just reverses this, and a lot of people in Iran are still Zoroastrian, so making a mess of religious policy is unpleasant. Continuing the expansions, it's fine. It's just mainly bringing loot back into the caliphate, but it's not really gaining that much. The expedition in Khorasan is just, he tries, but it doesn't work out, and there's some raids on the border from the Turks. The iconoclastic edict, I guess, is moderately uncool, but that's as far as we can see. So I feel like he is just quite vanilla-y, not very good. Like, he's not devastating, but I feel like, if you'd given these years to Umar, it would have been a much better caliphate.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking a 3 for Aaron Shine, because it's like getting a bit worse. Not so much worse, but still enough that it's worth noting.
Yeah.
3 as well? Okay. So with a 3 and a 3, he gets a 6 out of 20 for Aaron Shine.
We're just kindly agreeing on this one.
Our next category is Face of Faces. What do you think this man looked like? And we don't have descriptions, Ariel.
Yay.
So knock yourself out.
A dude. A young guy.
A young guy.
Although, by then, your 30s was like, you look pretty old, I bet.
Yeah, especially if you're drinking as much as is alleged.
Yes.
So. Okay, so Sarah has finished their drawing. Let me pick it up and I'll describe it to you all. Ooh, nice. That's pretty good. So, yes, what we have here is, I like the little stripy brush strokes. Those are very good.
Yeah.
So what we have here is Yazid reclining there. He has a fancy multi-folded turban on his head. He seems a bit sleepy, a bit put off. But he's there raising up a cup of wine, toasting as the cup is broadly illuminated, showing what his central interest is in ruling overall. So there we go. If any of you would like to see this drawing, you can go to the Discord if you're a patron. You can go to our episode notes in the description, or go to our website in Serial's portrait gallery. Now, Serial, unfortunately, as it has been the case for several past rulers, we do not have a portrait for Yazid. As you can imagine, we just have calligraphy. So it's going to get a big old 0. 0 out of 5 for Face of Faces. Our next category is lengthiness. How long do you think this man ruled?
I would say maybe a year.
He actually reigned a lot more than that, despite not achieving as much.
I was going to say, like, nothing happened.
4 years.
Okay. It's like nothing happened and he died young, so like what? But I guess.
Yeah, he reigned 1 year more than Umar. So, not great.
Woof.
So yeah, he reigned 4 years from 720 to 724. Divide that by 10. That is 0.4 out of 5 for lengthiness. Which brings us to the final score, which is a grand total of 17.4 out of 100, making him the worst of this season. Which is fair enough. And placing him, regarding the old season, just below Artabanus the First and Gatarzes the First, which, who you may ask, exactly, I will reply. Which I think makes our decision for us in the next bit, which is to say, is he drunk enough? Is he dominated by women enough? Is he unmemorable enough to be a Shahanshah? Or is he just a Shahanna?
I don't care for him.
Yeah, there's not much in Yazid. He is just there, isn't he? So, yeah. Sorry, Yazid. You're going to head off into the desert and meet Umar and tell him that maybe he didn't have to try so hard because he didn't get a Shahanshah and you didn't, so what are you going to do?
So you're the same,
you are
clearly.
Equal in everything. Yes, exactly.
Woof.
So there we go. That was our episode on Yazid II. We hope you had a good time, and we hope you'll join us next time for Hisham ibn Abd al-Malik, which I can promise will be more involved. And we can see how that plays out.
Yeah.
Because trouble is brewing, we need to figure out, will we solve this trouble, or will it eventually engulf us like the rising tide? Who knows? Join us next time to find out. In the meantime, if you'd like to support us, there are many ways to do so. You can join our Patreon, where we have a bunch of extra episodes that we are recording once a month. And at the end of this month, we're going to have Wu Zetian, the only woman to ever rule China. So she's pretty cool. She's interesting. If you want to learn more, definitely join us on Patreon. We have a bunch of extra other episodes that are in the backlog. If instead you'd rather not support us monetarily, that's fine, but we'd appreciate if you could give us a review on your podcast app of choice so you can let other people know that we exist and that they should join us on this adventure. So yeah, this is all we have for this time, but we hope you have a lovely week, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.